The soft hum of the airplane filled the cabin as passengers boarded the flight from New York to London. First class gleamed with quiet luxury, plush leather seats, crisp white linens, and the faint scent of fresh coffee in the air. Among the travelers was a poised black woman in her mid-40s, dressed simply in an elegant cream blazer and jeans. She carried herself with quiet confidence, greeting the crew with a warm smile before taking her seat by the window. Her name was Dr. Alicia Bennett, though no one on board knew that yet. As she placed her bag neatly under the seat, a flight attendant named Mr. Collins stopped in the aisle, glancing at her with suspicion. His brows furrowed slightly. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone tight. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Dr. Bennett looked up a little surprised. "Yes, 2A, that's what's printed on my ticket." He frowned, still unconvinced. "May I see your boarding pass?" She handed it over calmly, her movements graceful. Collins studied it for a long moment, too long, before handing it back without a word. Yet his eyes lingered, filled with silent judgment. Moments later, as other passengers filed in, Collins returned. "Ma'am, I'll need to see your ticket again," he demanded. Dr. Bennett blinked, confused. "I already showed it to you." "I just want to confirm something," he insisted, his voice growing sharper. Passengers nearby began to notice. A couple exchanged glances. The atmosphere shifted from peaceful to tense. Dr. Bennett took a slow breath. "Here," she said softly, offering the ticket again. But Collins snatched it from her hand roughly. A murmur ran through the cabin. The woman across the aisle frowned. "Sir," Dr. Bennett said quietly, "please be careful. There's no need to be aggressive." Collins straightened his tie, glaring down at her. "I'm just doing my job. People try to sneak into first class all the time." Gasps echoed faintly from nearby seats. Dr. Bennett froze, the insult hanging heavy in the air. She didn't respond, only looked up at him with steady, unflinching eyes. The cabin grew still, but what the attendant did next left the entire cabin in stunned silence. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to touch. Passengers were still settling into their seats. Yet all eyes kept darting toward row 2A, toward the elegant woman being quietly harassed by the flight attendant who just wouldn't let it go. Dr. Alicia Bennett sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She'd been through far worse in her life, but this was different. This wasn't a courtroom or a stage or an interview. This was public, intimate, personal. Mr. Collins stood tall in the aisle, his voice louder now. "I've told you before, this cabin is reserved for first-class passengers only. We've had issues with people moving up from economy." A murmur swept through the nearby seats. A young couple whispered, "That's her seat." "He's mistaken." But Collins didn't care to listen. Dr. Bennett spoke evenly. "Sir, as I've said, this is my seat. I paid for it. You've seen my boarding pass." Her tone was calm, but there was quiet authority in her words. Still, Collins scoffed. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult. If you really have a first-class ticket, you wouldn't be getting defensive." Gasps rippled through the cabin. One passenger, an older man in a business suit, leaned forward, his voice firm. "She's not being defensive. She's being polite. Maybe you should double-check your manifest." Collins turned sharply toward him. "Sir, please mind your own business," the woman across the aisle whispered under her breath. "This is unbelievable." She pulled out her phone and started recording. Dr. Bennett exhaled slowly, trying to keep her composure. "I'm not here to argue, sir. Please, you're making me uncomfortable." But instead of stepping back, Collins leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound intimidating. "Then perhaps you should move to your real seat before we have a problem." Her eyes widened slightly. She had faced racism before, but not this openly, not this brazenly. "I'm not moving," she said softly, "because I belong here." Those 5 words seemed to sting him. Collins straightened up, his face reddening. "That's it," he muttered, glancing toward the galley. "I'm calling security before we take off." Passengers began whispering louder now. A few were already recording. A mother from the row behind said loudly, "You're going to regret this, sir." Dr. Bennett's voice stayed level. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't escalate this. I've done nothing wrong." But Collins wasn't listening. He snatched her boarding pass once more, so fast and so roughly that the edge of the ticket grazed her wrist. The sudden motion made her flinch. That's when a passenger 2 rows back stood up. "Hey!" he shouted. "You don't treat people like that." Collins froze, startled by the outburst. The cabin was no longer quiet. Voices rose, cameras clicked, eyes burned into him from every direction. Dr. Bennett rubbed her wrist gently, her composure still unbroken. "You may return my ticket now," she said evenly. He did, but not without one last glare. "You'll need to speak with the captain." "I'll make sure of that." Her gaze didn't waver. "Then please do. I'll wait right here." A heavy silence followed. Even the hum of the engine seemed quieter, and then from the back a voice called out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Dr. Bennett turned, offering a small nod. "I'm fine. Thank you." Her calmness only made the injustice sharper. The passengers could feel it. The wrongness, the unnecessary aggression. Phones were up now, recording every second. Janelle, a young college student filming from the middle row, whispered into her camera, "He's harassing this woman for no reason." She showed her ticket twice. Jinky, the woman beside Dr. Bennett, looked furious but afraid to speak. The power imbalance was clear. Collins wore the uniform, the badge, the authority, and yet somehow, the woman in seat 2A looked more powerful than anyone in the room. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay before takeoff. Please remain seated." Everyone knew exactly why. Collins folded his arms, standing near the galley, glancing nervously at the watching eyes. For the first time, he looked unsure. Dr. Bennett sat quietly, staring out the window. Her reflection stared back, calm, composed, unbroken. She wasn't angry. She was disappointed, because deep down she knew this moment was bigger than her. Have you ever seen someone treated unfairly in public? Comment yes if you have. And tell us which city and country you're watching from. We'd love to know where our viewers are. The engines hummed softly beneath the floor, but inside the first-class cabin the air was thick with tension. Eyes darted toward Dr. Alicia Bennett, still seated calmly in 2A, and then toward the flight attendant, Mr. Collins, who now stood stiffly near the galley, his arms crossed. No one spoke. The silence was louder than words. Collins turned back toward her, clearly frustrated that she hadn't cowered or apologized. "Ma'am," he barked, "I've radioed the captain. You'll have to move until this is sorted." Dr. Bennett looked up slowly, her tone even but firm. "I am not moving from my assigned seat. I've complied with everything you asked. There is no reason to treat me like this." Her voice carried through the cabin, calm yet powerful. A few people clapped quietly, their solidarity breaking through the tension. Collins's jaw tightened. "I don't need an audience," he snapped, glancing around. "Everyone, please mind your own business," but no one looked away. Cameras were recording from nearly every angle now. Passengers had seen enough to know this wasn't about procedure. It was about pride, prejudice, and power. The attendant leaned closer again. "I'm giving you one last chance to cooperate." Dr. Bennett blinked slowly, then said, "You keep saying cooperate as if I've done something wrong. All I've done is sit in the seat I paid for." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Someone whispered, "She's right." And then, without warning, Collins reached toward her ticket again, too quickly, too roughly. His hand brushed against her arm, knocking her purse to the floor. The sound of it hitting the carpet echoed louder than it should have. Gasps filled the air. The woman across the aisle shouted, "Hey, you can't do that." Dr. Bennett froze. For a brief second, the world seemed to stop. She looked down at her fallen purse, then up at him, her expression not of anger but deep, quiet disappointment. "You just put your hands on me," she said softly. Her voice trembled, not from fear but from the sheer disbelief that, in 2025, such disrespect could still happen. Collins stepped back, suddenly realizing what he'd done. "It was an accident," he stammered. You were in my way." "No," she said, her eyes steady. "You crossed a line." The cabin erupted. Voices shouted, "That's not okay! We saw that." Someone called the captain. A man in business class leaned over the divider. "I got that on video." Collins's composure cracked. His hand hovered nervously near his radio. "Ma'am, please don't make this worse." Dr. Bennett rose slowly to her feet. She wasn't tall, but in that moment she seemed to tower over him. Her voice, calm but commanding, carried across the entire cabin. "I have been quiet, patient, and respectful," she said. "You have insulted me, accused me, and now laid your hand on me, all because you decided I didn't look like someone who belongs here." Every word hit like a hammer. Even the captain, who had just stepped into the cabin, stopped mid-stride. Passengers started clapping, some timidly, others boldly. One woman said aloud, "You tell him, ma'am." The attendant flushed red, looking from face to face, realizing the tide had turned. Dr. Bennett continued, her voice unwavering. "I don't raise my voice. I don't need to, because people like you only understand authority when it's loud. But I've learned that dignity speaks louder." The cabin fell silent again. Her children, seated a few rows behind, looked at her with wide, proud eyes. Collins glanced toward the captain as if seeking rescue. She's being difficult," he muttered. The captain's brow furrowed. "Difficult? From what I just saw, the only difficulty here is your behavior, Mr. Collins." The passengers erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "About time!" Collins' face went pale. "Sir, I was only trying to do my job." The captain's voice was firm. "Your job doesn't include manhandling passengers or questioning their worth." Collins stepped back, speechless. Dr. Bennett slowly sat back down, her composure returning as if it had never left. She glanced toward the woman who had filmed the entire exchange and gave a small nod. "Thank you," she said softly. The woman smiled. "No, thank you." The captain crouched beside Dr. Bennett. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry for what happened. I assure you this will be addressed." She looked at him kindly. "I appreciate that. I just hope it doesn't happen to the next woman who looks like me." The words lingered in the air like a prayer and a warning. Her calmness, her grace, her strength. It silenced everyone. The flight hadn't even left the ground, yet the lesson had already taken off. If you were sitting on that flight, would you step in or stay quiet? Type your answer in the comments below. The cabin remained silent long after the confrontation ended. The engines hummed, lights glowed softly above, and everyone sat frozen, still processing what they had just witnessed. Dr. Alicia Bennett sat back in her seat, calm as ever, adjusting her blazer. Her composure was unshaken, though the tremble in her hand betrayed a trace of the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Mr. Collins had disappeared toward the galley, muttering something into his radio, avoiding every gaze that followed him. The captain had spoken quietly with another flight attendant, assuring the passengers that the situation would be handled internally. But the passengers weren't ready to just move on. Something about the woman in seat 2A lingered in their minds. Her poise, her command, her unflinching strength. A teenage girl from row 4 leaned across the aisle, whispering to her mother, "She looks familiar, doesn't she?" Her mom nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I've seen her on TV before." The teenager pulled out her phone and began typing quickly. A few seconds later, her eyes widened. "Mom, that's Dr. Alicia Bennett, the human rights lawyer, the one who spoke at the United Nations last year." Her voice carried a little louder than she meant it to. Heads turned. "What did you say?" asked the woman across the aisle. "She's Dr. Bennett," the teen repeated, holding up her phone. On the screen glowed an image of the same calm, dignified face, standing behind a podium with the UN emblem, surrounded by flags from every nation. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A man in business class leaned forward, whispering, "You mean the Alicia Bennett? The Harvard professor? The one who fought that big discrimination case last year?" The teenager nodded, her excitement mixing with disbelief. "Yes, that's her. She's famous." The whisper became a wave, traveling from row to row like a spark catching fire. "That's her? No way. She looks exactly like her." She didn't even say anything about who she was. All the while, Dr. Bennett sat quietly, staring out the window. She didn't react to the murmurs, didn't smile, didn't confirm it. She didn't need to. The truth had already taken flight. Collins reappeared at the front of the cabin, his face pale, his voice trembling slightly as he tried to continue routine announcements. But the words came out broken, forced. He could feel the eyes burning holes through his back. Whispers turned into stares. A businessman muttered to his neighbor. He had no idea who he was talking to. Another added, "That makes it worse. You shouldn't need someone's title to treat them with respect." One of the flight attendants, a younger woman named Maria, quietly approached Dr. Bennett. Her voice shook with emotion. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say I'm so sorry for what happened. I saw everything. That wasn't right." Dr. Bennett smiled softly, her voice calm but kind. "Thank you. It's not your fault. Just promise me you'll never treat anyone that way, no matter who they are." Maria nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I won't." The teenage girl couldn't contain herself. She leaned forward from the next row. "Dr. Bennett, you're amazing. My class just studied your speech on equality last month." Alicia's smile widened gently. "Did you? That's wonderful. I hope it inspired you." "It did," the girl said, her voice filled with admiration. "You taught us that respect doesn't depend on power, and it's a choice." The passengers around them smiled. Some clapped softly, as if in appreciation for her grace. Even the captain, standing near the door, seemed to recognize the shift in energy. He turned to Collins, whispering sharply, "Do you have any idea who you just disrespected?" Collins blinked, confused. "She's a passenger." "She's not just a passenger," the captain said through gritted teeth. "She's one of the most respected human rights lawyers in the world. She's advised governments. She's represented victims of racial injustice." Collins' face turned crimson. He stumbled back a step, his breath catching. The full weight of what he'd done began to sink in. Meanwhile, the murmurs in the cabin softened into quiet awe. People weren't just shocked, they were inspired. One man spoke aloud, his voice steady. "She handled all that hate with grace. I couldn't have done it." Alicia turned toward him and said softly, "Grace isn't weakness. It's strength under control." Those words seemed to echo through the entire cabin. Phones continued recording, not out of curiosity now, but out of respect. Everyone knew they were witnessing something bigger than a flight delay. This was a lesson unfolding in real time. Even as whispers spread about her identity, Dr. Bennett never once bragged, never confirmed. She simply sat there, peaceful, composed, letting her dignity speak louder than any title ever could. And perhaps that was the greatest revelation of all, because in a world where everyone rushes to prove who they are, she had nothing to prove and everything to teach. The cabin was quieter than it had been all flight. Outside, clouds drifted past the windows, but inside, not a soul dared to move. Everyone knew something profound was about to happen. Mr. Collins stood near the galley, pale and tense, pretending to busy himself with the coffee cart. He could feel the weight of every stare, every camera still recording. The captain had already spoken to him, but now, even the air seemed heavy with expectation. Dr. Alicia Bennett sat in her seat for a long moment, looking out the window. The reflection of the clouds rippled across the glass, calm, soft, and endless. Finally, she turned. Her voice was steady, low, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "Sir," she began, addressing Collins directly, "you've embarrassed me in front of an entire plane full of strangers. You've questioned my honesty, my integrity, and even my right to sit in a seat that I paid for. And I want you to know I am not angry." A ripple of surprise passed through the passengers. "I'm not angry," she continued, "because anger is temporary. What I feel is sadness. Sadness that someone in your position, wearing a uniform meant to represent care and service, chose judgment over respect." Her words hit like quiet thunder. Collins froze. "I didn't mean—" he started, but she raised a hand gently, stopping him. "Please, don't explain it to me," she said. "Explain it to yourself. Ask why you felt so sure that I didn't belong here. Ask why you assumed I had done something wrong. Because that answer, that's what this whole world needs to understand." Every passenger was silent. Even the engine seemed to hum more softly, as if listening. Dr. Bennett rose from her seat slowly, her posture graceful and strong. Respect isn't a luxury reserved for the wealthy, the powerful, or the familiar. It's a right. Every person who steps on this plane, every person who walks this earth, deserves to be treated with basic dignity. A few people nodded, some wiping tears from their eyes. "You didn't see me," she said, her voice soft but piercing. "You saw a story your mind made up. That's what prejudice is. A lie told so often that it starts to sound like truth." A woman in the back whispered, "Wow." Under her breath, Dr. Bennett continued, "I've spent my life fighting for people who are silenced by moments just like this one. And I'm tired, because no matter how much progress we make, there's always another reminder, another flight, another uniform, another someone who thinks they can decide who belongs." She paused, letting the silence settle, then looked straight at Collins. "But I need you to understand something. Dignity can't be taken from me, not by words, not by looks, and not by ignorance. You can try to humiliate me, but you can't define me." The line hit the room like a spark. Collins's eyes darted to the floor. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the counter. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." "I truly am." Dr. Bennett gave a faint, knowing smile. "I accept your apology. But remember, an apology without change is just another lie." A hush fell across the cabin. Then, from somewhere near the back, someone began to clap. One person, then another. Soon, the entire cabin erupted in applause. Not loud or chaotic, but steady and rhythmic, filled with admiration and respect. Collins turned away, blinking hard. The captain stood nearby, nodding quietly, his eyes full of regret. Dr. Bennett took a deep breath and sat back down. Her hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline faded. Her children, who had been watching from a few rows behind, came forward quietly. Her daughter wrapped her arms around her. "You were so brave, Mom," she whispered. Alicia smiled softly. Sometimes being brave just means refusing to be small. Her husband reached over the seat and squeezed her hand. "You handled that better than anyone else could have." Around them, passengers still murmured in awe. Some leaned over to thank her. Others simply offered nods of quiet respect. Even the teenager who had recognized her earlier was crying softly, whispering to her phone. She didn't even shout. She just spoke truth. Dr. Bennett turned once more toward the window. The clouds outside glowed gold in the afternoon sun. Serene, endless free. For the first time since boarding, she smiled. Not because justice had been served yet, but because she had turned humiliation into hope. And without ever raising her voice, she had taught everyone on that plane what real power looks like. Do you think she handled it the right way? Tell us in the comments. Would you have stayed calm or spoken out differently? The aircraft had finally leveled at cruising altitude, but the tension still lingered like turbulence that refused to fade. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. Every passenger seemed to sense that the story wasn't over yet. Dr. Alicia Bennett sat upright, calm as ever, her hands resting neatly on her lap. Around her, people whispered in low voices, the glow of phone screens reflecting off their faces as they replayed the footage they'd captured moments ago. Up front, Mr. Collins stood stiffly by the galley, speaking in hushed tones with another flight attendant. His face was pale, his confidence drained away. The earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by shame and panic. Then came the soft ding of the cabin phone. The younger attendant, Maria, picked it up, listened, and turned toward Collins with a nervous expression. "They want you up front," she said quietly. "Now." Collins straightened his uniform and walked toward the cockpit, trying to compose himself. When he reached the doorway, the captain stepped out, but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a second officer who had just come aboard at the connecting stop before takeoff. Officer Raymond Lee, the airline's regional supervisor, there for a random inspection. "Mr. Collins," the captain said firmly, "we need to discuss what happened before departure." Raymond glanced toward the cabin and froze. His eyes landed instantly on Dr. Bennett. It took him less than a second to recognize her. "Wait," he said softly, pointing toward seat 2A. "Is that Dr. Alicia Bennett?" The captain nodded gravely. Raymond's jaw tightened. "You mean to tell me that the passenger who filed a misconduct report during boarding, the one he harassed, was her?" Collins' face went white. I didn't know who she was," he stammered. "That's the point," Raymond replied coldly. "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect." Passengers were watching now. The quiet murmurs grew into audible whispers. Raymond approached Dr. Bennett, his expression full of apology. "Dr. Bennett," he said respectfully, "I'm so sorry for what happened earlier. On behalf of the airline, I want to personally apologize for your treatment. What you experienced was unacceptable." Alicia looked up at him, her gaze calm but tired. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate your words, but I'm not the only person who deserves that apology. Everyone who's ever been judged before being known deserves one." Her tone wasn't angry. It was resolute, dignified, almost tender. Raymond nodded, his voice low. "You're absolutely right." He turned toward Collins. "Mr. Collins, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Collins swallowed hard. "Sir, I was following procedure." You thought," Raymond interrupted sharply. "That's the problem. You thought she didn't belong here. You thought you could treat her differently. And now your thoughts are going to cost you. The words hit like a gavel in a courtroom. Collins lowered his head, his lips trembling. I didn't mean to, Raymond raised a hand. Don't finish that sentence. Every person on this flight saw how you treated her. Intent doesn't erase impact. Passengers nodded in quiet agreement. Some even murmured, "That's right." Dr. Bennett, still seated, spoke up gently. "Officer Lee," she said, "please. I don't want anyone humiliated on my behalf." "That's not the lesson here." Raymond turned to her. "You're more gracious than most people could ever be." She shook her head slightly. "Grace isn't for him," she said softly. "It's for everyone watching. I want them to see that justice isn't revenge and it's restoration." The cabin fell silent again. Collins looked up, tears in his eyes. "Dr. Bennett, I'm sorry. I truly am. I was wrong." For a long moment she didn't speak. Then finally she said, "I believe you're sorry. I just hope that from now on when someone walks onto your plane, you see them as a person, not a problem." Collins nodded slowly, his voice breaking. "Yes, ma'am. I will." Raymond stepped forward, his voice steady. "Mr. Collins, you'll be relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight. There will be a formal review waiting when we land." He turned toward the rest of the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience, and for your courage in speaking up. What happened today will be addressed properly." Applause rippled through the cabin, soft at first, then growing stronger. Dr. Bennett bowed her head slightly, acknowledging the crowd. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not for defending me, but for reminding him that silence is also a choice." Her words hung in the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. The captain cleared his throat, visibly moved. "Dr. Bennett, we'd like to offer our sincerest apologies and complimentary service for the rest of your flight." She smiled gently. "Thank you, Captain. But I'm fine. I don't need free champagne. I just need people to be better." A laugh escaped from a few passengers, lightening the mood. Even the captain smiled, nodding in agreement. As Raymond escorted Collins toward the crew section, passengers whispered words like powerful, graceful, and heroic. Dr. Bennett leaned back in her seat, exhaling softly. Her daughter reached over and took her hand. "Mom," she said, her eyes wide with pride, "you changed that man's heart." Alicia looked down at her daughter and smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I hope I changed a few minds too." Outside the window, the sunset painted the clouds in shades of gold and crimson, a sky reborn after a storm. In that moment, the plane didn't just carry passengers. It carried a message. Do you think the flight attendant deserves to lose his job after this? Or does everyone deserve a second chance? Share your opinion in the comments below. By the time Flight 492 landed in London, the world was already watching. Even before the plane's wheels touched the runway, footage from inside the cabin had spread like wildfire across social media. Dozens of passengers had posted videos, each showing the same moment from a different angle. A uniformed attendant speaking harshly, a composed woman refusing to be intimidated, and then that unforgettable voice saying, "Respect isn't a luxury, it's a right." The clip exploded across every platform. Within hours, hashtags trended worldwide. "Your Alicia Bennett, your first-class dignity, your respect is right." Major news outlets picked up the story before the passengers had even cleared customs. Headlines appeared in every language. Human rights lawyer harassed on flight responds with, "Grace, passenger, stands up to discrimination at 30,000 feet. Calm courage. How Alicia Bennett silenced prejudiced journalists. Waited outside the terminal, cameras flashing as Dr. Bennett emerged with her family. But she didn't hide. She didn't rush away or call for privacy. She stopped, smiled gently at the reporters, and said the same thing she'd told the world from that plane. No one should be judged by appearance. We all deserve dignity, whether we're in first class or the back row. That soundbite became the heartbeat of a movement. The airline issued a formal statement the next day, confirming an internal investigation. Mr. Collins was placed on immediate suspension pending review. Their apology was public, heartfelt, and, this time, sincere. But something bigger had already taken shape. Everywhere, people were talking. In classrooms, teachers replayed the footage as a lesson in empathy and bias. On morning shows, experts debated how unconscious prejudice still shaped daily life. Even law enforcement agencies shared the clip, calling it a powerful reminder of how authority must always be exercised with respect. And at the center of it all was Dr. Bennett, not seeking fame, not demanding compensation, but reminding everyone that how we treat one another is the truest reflection of who we are. She posted once on her social media account, a simple message against a white background. Grace under pressure is not weakness, it's power in its purest form. May we all learn to look deeper before we judge. It was shared over 5 million times in 2 days. Meanwhile, the passengers who had been on Flight 492 were now seen as eyewitnesses to history. Many appeared on talk shows, still emotional, recalling the way she had remained calm through it all. One of them, the teenage girl from row 4, told reporters through tears, "She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just stood there and somehow made everyone want to be better." That single quote went viral too. The airline later reached out privately to Dr. Bennett, offering an official commendation for her graceful leadership in the face of adversity. She accepted only on one condition, that they commit to mandatory bias and empathy training for all staff. From pilots to baggage handlers, her exact words were, "I don't want a refund. I want reform," and she got it. Within weeks, the company rolled out new sensitivity training programs inspired by her experience, even naming the initiative Project Bennett. In an exclusive interview days later, Dr. Bennett reflected on what had happened. "It wasn't about me," she said. "It was about what we see when we look at someone, and what we fail to see when we look through them instead." Her interview racked up tens of millions of views. Schools began adding her quotes to lesson plans. Nonprofits used her story in seminars about dignity and inclusion. Even celebrities reposted her message, echoing her words. No one should have to prove their worth to deserve respect. Mr. Collins, the attendant, released his own statement weeks later. It was short, humble, and remorseful. He admitted he'd been wrong, not just in action, but in mindset. "I thought respect was something people earned," he wrote, "but I learned it's something we owe." That line alone showed how deeply the moment had changed him and thousands who read it. Dr. Bennett never spoke of him again. When asked by a reporter whether she forgave him, she simply said, "I hope he's learned." That's all forgiveness needs to mean. And just like that, the story that began as humiliation ended as transformation. Because the truth is, what happened on that flight wasn't just a viral moment, it was a mirror, a reflection of who we are and who we still need to become. As one commentator put it best, Dr. Bennett didn't fight back. She stood tall, and in doing so, she reminded the world that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply stands still. If you believe in respect, dignity, and equality for every human being, no matter their skin color, job, or status, and type respect in the comments.